The Absaroka Mountains held secrets older than nations. Tonight they would witness something that had never been recorded in any military archive. Lieutenant Cassandra Thorne had been motionless for 6 hours and 43 minutes. Her body wrapped in a ghillie suit that made her indistinguishable from the granite and scrub pine around her had become part of the landscape itself. The cold had long since stopped bothering her. At 31 degrees Fahrenheit, most soldiers would be shivering uncontrollably. Cass breathed slowly, measuring each exhale to avoid creating vapor that might give away her position. Through her Schmidt and Bender scope, she watched the compound 200 meters to the northeast. Alexei Markov, Russian arms dealer and ghost in a dozen international databases, stood in the courtyard speaking with 3 men in tactical gear. She'd tracked him for 11 days through these mountains, following a trail of encrypted communications and dead drops that led back to a weapons cache that could arm a small army. Or worse, much worse. The intel was specific. Markov had acquired 6 FIM-92 Stinger surface-to-air missiles from an Army depot theft 3 months prior. Portable, shoulder-fired, capable of downing commercial aircraft. In the hands of domestic extremists, those missiles represented a nightmare scenario that kept counterterrorism analysts awake at night. Cass's right eye never left the scope. Her left eye remained open, maintaining peripheral awareness. A technique her father had taught her when she was 8 years old hunting elk in the Montana wilderness north of their family ranch. Never give up your peripheral vision, Cassie. Captain Mitchell Thorne had told her, his hand steadying her first rifle. The world doesn't stop just because you're focused on one thing. That was 20 years ago. Her father had been killed in Desert Storm when she was 14, taking shrapnel meant for his radio operator during the final days of the ground war. She joined the Army at 18 with his name and his legacy carved into her heart like words on a tombstone. The wind shifted. Cass felt it before her equipment registered it. 2 miles per hour increase from the east, temperature dropping another degree. She reached up with glacial slowness and adjusted her scope. 0.4 mils. The calculation was instinctive, now buried in muscle memory after 10,000 practice rounds and 3 deployments. Movement in the compound. Markov was heading toward the building where the Stingers were stored. 6 hours from now, Cass would call in the Joint Special Operations Command strike team waiting 40 miles west. They would hit the compound at dawn, seize the missiles, and Markov would spend the rest of his life in a federal supermax prison. 11 days of solo reconnaissance. 11 days of cold rations, no fire, minimal movement. 11 days of waiting for this exact moment. Her radio crackled. Single click, then 2 more. Emergency beacon protocol. Cass's heart rate elevated for the first time in hours. Her left hand moved to her tactical radio, switching to the emergency frequency. Static, then a voice strained and professional despite the obvious pain behind it. All stations, this is Wolfpack Actual. We are pinned down at grid November Victor 7342. Heavy contact, approximately 4 or 5 hostiles, 3 flanks. We have 2 critical casualties. Requesting immediate QRF. Repeat, requesting immediate QRF. The voice belonged to a man who understood that his next few minutes might be his last. Cass recognized the control it took to sound that calm. She pulled up her tactical display. Grid November Victor 7342, 8.5 kilometers southeast of her position. The canyon system where Highway 212 cut through the mountains before the Montana-Wyoming border. Wolfpack Actual, this is command. Copy your traffic. QRF is wheels up in 90 minutes. Hold your position. Air support is unavailable due to weather. Hold position and wait for ground element. 90 minutes. Cass had been in enough firefights to know what 90 minutes meant when you were outnumbered 7-1 with wounded soldiers and dwindling ammunition. It meant body bags. It meant flag-draped coffins. It meant families getting visits from casualty notification officers in dress uniforms. She brought her scope back to Markov's compound. He was disappearing into the storage building now. In 6 hours, this would all be over. The mission would be complete. The missiles would be secured. Justice would be served. But 6 men would be dead. Cass closed her eyes. Behind her eyelids, she saw her father's funeral. She was 14 years old again, standing in her black dress at Fort Carson, as 7 rifles fired 3 times each. She remembered her mother's face carved from stone and grief. She remembered the officer who handed her the folded flag. Your father died protecting his team. the officer had said. He was a hero. What the officer hadn't said was that the support unit had been 20 minutes away, close enough to help. They'd been ordered to maintain position to wait for confirmation to follow protocol. By the time they arrived, Captain Mitchell Thorne had bled out from wounds that a medic could have stabilized. Mission priorities. That's what the after-action report called it. Cass opened her eyes. Through her scope, Markov emerged from the building. He was talking on a satellite phone now, gesturing to his men. In 90 minutes, he might be gone. The compound might be empty. 11 days of work could vanish like morning fog. Her hand moved to the radio. Wolfpack Actual, this is Raven 6. I'm 8 clicks north of your position. Moving to support. The response was immediate. Different voice, command authority, colonel level judging by the tone. Raven 6, this is Grizzly Command. You are ordered to maintain your current position. Do not abandon your observation post. That is a direct order. Cass looked at Markov through her scope. Then she looked at the grid coordinates on her display where 6 soldiers were fighting for their lives. Grizzly Command, this is Raven 6. Copy your traffic. Experiencing significant radio interference in my sector. Signal breaking up. She switched frequencies before command could respond. Her fingers moved with practiced efficiency, breaking down her hide site. Everything that identified her presence disappeared into her pack. The position she'd maintained for 6 hours and 43 minutes ceased to exist in under 2 minutes. Cass began moving south, flowing through the terrain like water finding its path downhill. She'd walked these mountains for 11 days. She knew every ridge, every draw, every approach that offered cover and concealment. Behind her, Markov and his missile issues, in 11 days of mission work, faded into the darkness. Ahead, 6 men she'd never met were running out of time. The canyon system where Wolfpack had been ambushed was a natural kill zone. Cass saw it immediately when she reached the ridgeline overlooking their position. Highway 212 cut through a narrow gorge with rock walls rising 200 feet on either side. Someone had planned this ambush with professional precision. Wolfpack had taken cover in a shallow depression 60 feet off the road. Barely enough space for 6 men and their equipment. No escape routes. No fallback positions. Just rocks and determination and the diminishing ammunition that represented the gap between life and death. Cass counted the enemy positions. 13 to the east scattered among the boulders overlooking the highway. 9 to the south using a burned-out truck for cover. 15 to the west, the most organized group moving with the discipline of professional soldiers. 8 more providing overwatch from elevated positions. 45 hostiles, maybe more in the rocks she couldn't see. She settled into a prone position on a granite shelf 180 meters northwest of Wolfpack's location. Her Remington MSR came off her back with the smooth efficiency of 10,000 repetitions. The custom .338 Lapua Magnum was more than a weapon. It was an extension of her will, a tool that translated intention into action across distances that most people couldn't comprehend. Cass built her shooting position with methodical care. Bipod deployed, stock adjusted, body positioned at a 45-degree angle to the target area. Left leg bent, right leg straight, right arm tucked tight to her body. Left hand supporting the forend with exactly the right amount of pressure. Her scope revealed details that told stories. Wolfpack's machine gunner was down to short, desperate bursts, ammunition discipline born of necessity. One man wasn't moving at all, another leaning over him with medical supplies. 2 others returning fire, but their shots were scattered suppressive rather than aimed. They were trying to keep the enemy's heads down, buying time they didn't have. The enemy mortar team caught her attention. 3 men working with practiced efficiency setting up their tube in a depression 300 meters south of Wolfpack. Once that mortar started dropping rounds, the shallow depression that Wolfpack called cover would become a tomb. Cass began her calculations. Range 180 meters. She clicked her rangefinder twice to confirm. 182 meters. Close enough. Wind. She read the grass, the way the light rain moved the barely perceptible shift in the air. 14 miles per hour from the east, gusting to 19. At this range, wind would everything. 3/4 value wind meant 10.5 miles per hour of effective crosswind, pushing her bullet right. Temperature 31 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold air was denser than warm air. Her bullet would drop 2.3 inches more per 100 yards than the ballistic tables calculated for standard conditions. Angle 22 degrees downward. Gravity had less time to pull the bullet down on an angled shot. She had to calculate the cosine of the angle and adjust accordingly. Effective distance, 1,089 meters. Spin drift. At 1,180 meters, her bullet's rotation would push it 4.2 inches to the right. Not much, but at this distance, inches meant the difference between a headshot and a clean miss. Target movement, the mortar gunner was shifting his position, adjusting the tube, moving left to right at approximately 2 feet per second. She'd need to lead him by 18 inches. Coriolis effect, at this latitude, 45 degrees north, the Earth's rotation would deflect her bullet 3 inches to the right. Most shooters ignored it. Most shooters couldn't make shots at this distance. Cass wasn't most shooters. She settled behind her rifle. Her breathing slowed. Heart rate dropped. The world narrowed to the circle of her scope, to the crosshairs that marked where physics and skill and will intersected. The mortar gunner bent over his tube, making a final adjustment. Cass's finger took up the slack in her trigger. 2 pounds of pressure. Then the wall. She pressed through it with steady increasing force. The rifle spoke. The sound was muted by her suppressor, a hard thump rather than a crack. The recoil pushed back into her shoulder with familiar force. Through her scope, she watched the bullet's flight. 0.74 seconds. That's how long physics needed to carry her bullet across 182 meters of mountain air. The mortar gunner's head snapped back. He collapsed across his tube, his body going instantly limp, in the way that only catastrophic brain trauma produced. Cass worked the bolt, smooth, mechanical, ejecting the spent case and chambering a fresh round. Her eye never left the scope. The assistant gunner looked up, confused. His brain was trying to process what had just happened. Understanding came too slowly. Cass's second shot took him in the center of the chest. He fell backward, arms spreading wide. The spotter grabbed for his radio. His mouth was opening to shout a warning. Cass's third shot went through his binoculars and into his face. 3 shots. 9 seconds. The mortar team was eliminated. At Wolfpack's position, the change was immediate. Cass could see it even from 180 meters away. The soldiers stopped firing. They were looking around, trying to understand what had just happened. One of them, the team leader, based on the way he moved, brought his radio up. His voice came through on the emergency frequency, tight with confusion and hope. "What the hell? Who's shooting?" Cass didn't answer. She was already shifting her aim, finding her next target. The machine gun nest on the eastern approach. 3 men, a PKM medium machine gun on a bipod. The gunner was firing long bursts into Wolfpack's position, the barrel glowing red in her thermal scope. Range 920 meters. Easier shot. Less wind at this angle. She adjusted for the new distance and fired. The gunner slumped forward over his weapon. The PKM went silent. His assistant looked up, scanning for threats. Wrong move. You never skyline yourself when there's a sniper in play. Cass's follow-up shot dropped him before he finished turning his head. The ammunition bearer tried to run. Cass led him by 2 feet and fired. He managed 3 steps before her bullet found him. All units were taking fire from an unknown position, Northwest Sector sniper. The enemy radio traffic was panicked now. Professional soldiers didn't panic easily. But when death comes from nowhere, when your teammates drop without warning, fear is the natural response. Cass's ammunition count, 44 rounds remaining. Enemy count, 39 remaining. She relocated. Basic sniper doctrine. Never fire more than 3 shots from the same position. She moved 40 meters west, finding a new hide among a cluster of boulders that gave her a slightly different angle on the battlefield. Through her scope, she watched the enemy react. They were good. They'd gone defensive, using cover scanning for threats. But they were looking in the wrong direction, still focused on where her first shots had come from. An RPG team caught her attention. 2 men, one carrying the launcher, one carrying 3 rockets. They were moving toward Wolfpack's flank, using a shallow ravine for concealment. If they got into position, 1 rocket would be enough to kill everyone in that depression. Cass didn't give them the chance. The rocket man first. Range 850 meters. She put a round through his chest as he crouched to move forward. He dropped the launcher, clutching at the wound he couldn't see, couldn't comprehend. His partner tried to grab the RPG. Cass shot him through the neck. Not a kill shot she'd aimed for, but the wind had pushed her bullet 6 inches left. Close enough. He went down, choking on his own blood. 10 confirmed eliminations. 35 enemies remaining. The enemy commander was making decisions now. Cass could tell by the way the forces were reorganizing. They'd stopped their assault. They were pulling back to defensive positions trying to locate the sniper who was systematically dismantling their attack. Good tactics, smart commander. But Cass had the high ground superior equipment and skills honed over 10 years in 3 combat deployments. She began working her way through their positions with methodical precision. A spotter here, a squad leader there. Every shot carefully chosen. Every target selected for maximum tactical impact. The radio traffic told her everything she needed to know. We've lost the mortar team. We've lost both machine guns. Someone tell me where this shooter is. Northwest Ridge has to be range at least 800 meters. That's impossible. Nobody makes shots like that. Tell that to Petrov. He's dead. Cass continued firing. Her rhythm was mechanical now, almost meditative. Acquire target. Calculate distance and wind. Compensate for all variables. Press trigger. Work bolt. Find next target. Repeat. 15 eliminations. 30 enemies remaining. At Wolfpack's position, the soldiers had stopped taking incoming fire. They were using the respite to treat their wounded, to reload, to try and understand what was happening. The team leader got on the radio again. His voice was different now. Still professional, but with an undercurrent of something else. Awe, maybe, or disbelief. To whoever's providing support, we see you. We don't know who you are, but we see you. Thank you. Cass still didn't respond. Words didn't matter right now. Only actions mattered. Only the next shot, and the one after that, and the one after that, until Wolfpack could extract safely. She shifted position again, moving to a promontory that gave her a view of the southern approach. The enemy was consolidating there, probably planning a final push before they lost too many people to continue. That's when she saw the vehicles. 2 technical trucks, Toyota Land Cruisers with heavy machine guns mounted in their beds. Behind them, grinding up the mountain road in low gear, a BTR-70 armored personnel carrier. Soviet-era vehicle, but still deadly. 8mm armor on the front. 14.5mm KPV heavy machine gun. Enough firepower to shred Wolfpack's position in seconds. The tactical situation had just changed from bad to catastrophic. Cass watched the vehicles approach through her scope. The lead technical truck had a .50 caliber Browning M2 in the bed. The gunner was standing behind it, hands on the weapon, scanning for targets. The second truck mounted a PKM medium machine gun lighter, but just as lethal at close range. The BTR was the real problem. Its armor would shrug off anything Wolfpack could throw at it. Once that 14.5mm cannon opened up, the shallow depression where 6 soldiers were sheltering would become a shooting gallery. She had to stop them before they got into effective range. The lead technical was at 140 meters. Moving target, but the mountain road forced it to travel in a relatively predictable path. Cass watched it navigate a switchback, calculating speed and trajectory. Her target wasn't the truck, it was the gunner. She led him by 3 feet, compensating for the truck's movement and the angle of approach. Her finger pressed through the trigger. The gunner's body jerked backward, arms flying wide. He fell out of the truck bed, rolling once before disappearing over the side of the road. The driver panicked. Cass could see it in the way the truck swerved in the sudden loss of control. She'd anticipated this. Her second shot was already in the air before the driver even processed that his gunner was dead. The windshield was at an angle, which meant the bullet would deflect. Cass had compensated for 6 inches of bullet rise as it punched through the glass and into the driver's chest. The truck veered hard left, mounted a boulder, and flipped. It tumbled twice before wedging into a ravine 40 feet below the road. 1 down. The second technical tried to reverse to get out of the kill zone. Too slow. Cass pulled an incendiary round from her kit. Armor-piercing incendiary designed to punch through light vehicle armor and start fires. She aimed for the external fuel tank mounted on the truck's bed. Range 890 meters. Wind had shifted again, now gusting to 20 miles per hour. She adjusted and fired. The tank ruptured. Diesel fuel sprayed across the back of the truck. The incendiary component of her round did its job. Fire bloomed orange and hungry in the mountain darkness. 3 soldiers bailed out of the burning truck, their clothes already smoking. Cass gave them mercy shots. Quick, clinical. They died without suffering. 2 down. The BTR kept coming. Its commander had buttoned up hatches, closed vision blocks, protecting him from sniper fire. Smart move. The vehicle was essentially a moving fortress now. Cass studied it through her scope. 8mm frontal armor, too thick for her rifle. Side armor was thinner but still enough to stop her rounds. The tires were run flat, designed to keep working even after being shot. She needed the commander to make a mistake. The BTR slowed as it approached Wolfpack's position. 600 meters, 500, 400. At 300 meters, the commander's hatch opened 6 inches. He needed visibility to direct his crew to acquire targets for that massive cannon. 6 inches. That's all Cass had to work with. She watched him through her scope. He was scanning left toward Wolfpack. In 3 seconds, he'd look right, checking his flank. In 5 seconds, he'd duck back down and close the hatch. Cass had 3 seconds. Range 1070 meters. Extreme angle shot. Moving target. 6-inch opening. Wind gusting unpredictably. She stopped breathing. Her heart beat twice. On the second beat in the pause between systole and diastole, her finger moved. The rifle fired. Through her scope, she watched the commander's head snap back. His body slumped over the hatch rim, preventing it from closing. The BTR stopped moving. 20 seconds of chaos inside that vehicle. Then the rear hatch dropped and the crew bailed out, hands in the air, weapons abandoned. They'd had enough. Cass let them run. They weren't a threat anymore, and killing soldiers who'd surrendered wasn't something she did. She had standards, lines she wouldn't cross. That's what separated her from the people she was fighting. She checked her ammunition, 28 rounds remaining. She'd fired 22 rounds and eliminated 19 targets, disabled 3 vehicles, and saved 6 lives. It wasn't enough yet. 30 enemies remained, and some of them were professional enough to keep fighting. That's when she heard the crack of a bullet passing over her head. The sound came before the impact. Supersonic round. Close enough that she heard its passage through the air. Close enough to feel the pressure wave. Someone had found her. Cass rolled left on pure instinct, putting 3 meters of distance between herself and her last firing position. A second bullet cratered the rock where her head had been 2 seconds earlier. Enemy counter-sniper. And whoever they were good. She found cover behind a thick boulder, her mind racing through the geometry of the battlefield. The shot had come from the south, from an elevated position roughly 900 meters away. She hadn't seen a sniper position there, which meant they'd been concealed, waiting, watching for her muzzle flash. The enemy radio traffic confirmed it. I have her general area, Western Ridge, 800 to 900 meters from the Americans. The voice was female, Russian accent, calm and professional in a way that sent warning signals through Cass's tactical awareness. Female shooter, the voice continued. Breathing pattern gives it away. Smaller lungs mean different vapor signature in this cold. Cass felt a spike of anger, not because the enemy's sniper was female, because she'd been careless enough to be spotted. She forced the emotion down. Emotion got you killed in sniper duels. Only skill and patience mattered now. Through a gap in the rocks, she caught a flash of movement. The enemy sniper repositioning, moving to a new angle. Smart. Cass would have done the same thing. She needed to bait a shot, get the enemy to reveal their position. Cass pulled off her boonie cap. Carefully, slowly, she placed it on the end of her rifle barrel and raised it above the boulder. The response was immediate. A round punched through the cap, tearing it from the rifle. But Cass had already moved. During the half-second, the enemy sniper's attention was on the decoy. Cass had shifted 8 meters right, finding a new firing position in a cluster of rocks that gave her an angle on where that shot had originated. There, 940 meters south, a shallow depression between 2 large boulders. Just enough space for a prone shooter. And in that space, barely visible in the darkness and rain, the outline of a human form. They fired at exactly the same instant. Cass felt the enemy's bullet pass so close to her face that she felt the pressure wave. It hit the rock beside her head with enough force to send stone fragments cutting into her cheek. Blood ran warm down her face, mixing with rain and dirt. But her shot was true. Through her scope, she saw the enemy sniper arch backward, the rifle falling from suddenly nerveless hands. Center mass shot right through the chest. The figure fell rolling down the slope before coming to rest against a boulder. Cass touched her cheek. The cuts were superficial, but it had been close. Inches, maybe less. Her hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up with her. She'd been in firefights before, but she'd never faced another sniper in direct confrontation. Never had to match skills with someone who understood the same principles, who'd trained in the same craft. She checked her ammunition. 24 rounds. She'd need every one of them. At Wolfpack's position, the soldiers were moving. Using the chaos and the suppression Cass had provided, they were extracting from their depression, carrying their wounded, moving toward better cover. The team leader got on the radio. Raven 6, I don't know who you are, but I've never seen shooting like that. Cass found her voice. First words she'd spoken since starting this engagement. Just doing my job, Sergeant. It's Master Sergeant Garrett Brennan. And that's not just a job. Where'd you train? Ranger School, Fort Benning. Sniper qualification scored 98.6%. A pause. When Brennan spoke again, his voice had changed, uncertain, almost afraid to ask. Thorne, Cassandra Thorne. Cass felt her breath catch. How did he know her name? How do you know who I am? Your father, Captain Mitchell Thorne. I served under him in Desert Storm. He was my team leader. He saved my life. Took shrapnel that was meant for me. The world stopped. Cass stared through her scope at the distant figures of Wolfpack, but she wasn't seeing them anymore. She was seeing her father's funeral, the folded flag, the empty place at the dinner table. Lieutenant Thorne, Brennan's voice was gentle now. You still there? I'm here. He talked about you all the time, showed me pictures of you hunting with him back in Montana, said you were going to be better than him someday. Brennan paused. He was right. He'd be so damn proud of what you just did. Cass felt something crack inside her chest. Some wall she'd built after her father died, some barrier between duty and emotion. Then let's make sure I get you home, she said, her voice not quite steady, like he would have wanted. Copy that. What do you need from us? Stay in cover. Treat your wounded. I'll handle the pressure. Roger. And Thorne. Yes, thank you for not leaving us behind. Cass didn't trust herself to speak. She clicked her radio twice. Acknowledgement without words. Below, the remaining enemy forces were reorganizing. 26 combatants by her count. Still enough to overwhelm Wolfpack if they coordinated their attack. She wouldn't let that happen. Cass settled back into her shooting position. The pain in her cheek was distant, now unimportant. Her hands had stopped shaking. The rifle felt steady again, an extension of her will. She began working through the targets with renewed focus. Squad leader at 870 meters. Headshot. His second in command at 920 meters. Center mass, radio operator at 760 meters. Through the radio he was holding. The enemy began falling back, not retreating but consolidating. They'd lost too many people to continue the assault. Now they were trying to survive until reinforcements arrived. Cass kept firing, methodical, precise, each shot chosen for maximum effect. 27 confirmed eliminations, 30 confirmed, 32. The last of the enemy forces broke contact, dragging their wounded, disappearing into the mountain darkness. They'd had enough. Their mission, whatever it had been, wasn't worth dying for anymore. Cass checked her ammunition. 7 rounds remaining. She wouldn't need them. The battlefield fell silent except for the wind and the rain. Somewhere to the northeast, Alexei Markov was probably loading those Stinger missiles onto a helicopter. 11 days of work disappearing into the night. But 6 soldiers were alive. 6 men who would go home to families, to futures, to all the moments they would have lost. Cass thought about her father, about the choice he'd made to take shrapnel meant for Garrett Brennan, about the principle that had defined his service and ultimately his death. Some missions were worth failing. Some things mattered more than objectives and after-action reports and mission success rates. Her radio crackled. Raven 6, this is Grizzly Command. QRF is inbound ETA 8 minutes. Prepare for extraction and debriefing. The colonel's voice was cold, professional, but underneath it Cass heard something else. Disapproval. The knowledge that she'd violated a direct order and there would be consequences. Copy command, standing by. She began breaking down her position, packing her equipment. In 8 minutes, helicopters would arrive. In an hour, she'd be facing questions about her decisions. In a day, there would probably be formal charges. Career over. Mission failed. but 6 soldiers alive. Cass looked south toward Wolfpack's position. They were moving now, carrying their wounded toward the extraction point. One of them looked back toward her position, raised his hand in salute. She returned it, though she knew he probably couldn't see her at this distance in the darkness. Worth it, all of it, worth it. Lieutenant Cassandra Thorne shouldered her rifle and began the descent from her ridge. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the sound of helicopter rotors, coming to take her back to whatever consequences waited. She walked toward them without hesitation. Her father would have done the same thing. The rain had turned to sleet by the time Cass reached the valley floor. Ice crystals stung her face, mixing with the dried blood on her cheek where rock fragments had cut her during the sniper duel. Her legs burned from the rapid descent muscles, protesting after hours of motionless shooting, followed by a kilometer of steep terrain navigated in near darkness. Wolfpack's position was 300 meters ahead. She could see them now without her scope, 6 figures moving with the controlled urgency of soldiers who knew they weren't safe yet. 2 were being carried, others providing security despite their own wounds. Cass maintained her approach vector, moving through cover, even though the immediate threat had passed. Training didn't stop just because the shooting had. Bad habits got you killed, her father used to say. Stay sharp until you're behind friendly lines, then stay sharp some more. Raven 6, this is Wolfpack Actual. We have visual on your position. Come on in. Master Sergeant Garrett Brennan's voice carried the exhaustion of a man who'd been fighting for his life. But underneath it, something else. Relief, gratitude. The kind of emotion soldiers tried to hide but couldn't quite manage after a near-death experience. Cass keyed her radio. Copy Wolfpack. Coming in from your northwest 50 meters. She emerged from the rocks into the small perimeter Wolfpack had established. 6 soldiers turned to face her, weapons lowered, but ready. Professional security even in their exhausted state. The first thing Cass noticed was how young they looked. Then she realized they probably thought the same thing about her. Brennan stepped forward. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with the weathered face of a man who'd spent decades in the field. His left hand pressed against his side where his uniform was dark with blood. But his eyes were clear, assessing, taking her measure the way senior NCOs always did. Lieutenant Thorne, he said it like he was testing the name, connecting the person in front of him to the 8-year-old girl in the photographs Captain Mitchell Thorne had shown him 23 years ago. You look just like him. Cass didn't know what to say to that. She'd spent her entire adult life hearing about her father from people who'd served with him. Everyone had a story. Everyone remembered Captain Thorne as larger than life, the kind of officer who led from the front and never asked his soldiers to do anything he wouldn't do himself. She'd never been able to live up to that ghost. Master Sergeant, she said finally, your casualties. Brennan gestured to the 2 men lying on ponchos that had been spread on the ground. Private First Class Quinn Madigan, head trauma unconscious for most of the fight. He came around about 10 minutes ago. Seems stable, but needs a CT scan. The young soldier in question gave her a weak thumbs up. His face was pale, eyes unfocused, but he was breathing steadily. Staff Sergeant Elijah Harmon took shrapnel to the leg and arm. Lost a lot of blood, but tourniquets are holding. He'll keep the limbs if we get him out soon. Cass knelt beside Harmon. He was older, maybe 40, with the calm demeanor of a combat medic who'd seen worse and survived. His left leg was wrapped in pressure bandages, the tourniquet above his knee applied with textbook precision. Ma'am, Harmon said, his voice steady despite the pain he must be feeling. That was some of the finest shooting I've ever witnessed. 32 confirmed eliminations at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters in adverse conditions. That's not normal. Just doing what needed to be done. No, ma'am, that was something else entirely. The other Wolfpack members were introducing themselves. Sergeant Rowan Fletcher, the communications specialist, had managed to keep their radio operational despite the antenna being shot off twice. Corporal Declan Shaw had held their defensive position with a machine gun, firing controlled bursts even as his ammunition dwindled to nothing. Specialist Tobias Grant had prevented 2 flanking attempts with well-placed grenades before running out. They were all looking at her with expressions she couldn't quite read. Not just gratitude, something more. Awe, maybe, the kind of reaction that made her uncomfortable. Lieutenant Brennan said quietly, pulling her aside, I need to know. What mission did you abandon to come help us? Cass hesitated. Operational security meant she shouldn't discuss her assignment. But these men had almost died. They deserved to know what she'd sacrificed. Surveillance operation. High-value target. Arms dealer named Alexei Markov. I'd been tracking him for 11 days. He's got 6 Stinger missiles stolen from an army depot, planning to sell them to domestic extremist groups. Brennan's face went pale. Stinger missiles. Jesus Christ. And you left that to save us. The mission hasn't failed yet. Command can still send a strike team to the compound. By the time they organize that, Markov will be gone, you know it. I know it. Brennan looked at her with something approaching horror. Lieutenant, you just sacrificed a mission that could save hundreds of lives. I saved 6 lives that were right in front of me. That's the choice I could live with. Before Brennan could respond, the sound of helicopter rotors echoed through the canyon. 2 Black Hawks running low and fast, their searchlights cutting through the sleet. That's our ride, Rowan Fletcher called out. QRF is here. The helicopters landed in the only flat area available, their rotors kicking up debris and ice. Pararescue jumpers spilled out, moving immediately to Madigan and Harmon. A lieutenant colonel emerged from the lead bird, his face grim. Wolfpack, get your wounded loaded. You're going straight to the hospital at Fort Harrison. He turned to Cass. Lieutenant Thorne, you're with me. We need to talk. It wasn't a request. Cass climbed into the helicopter. Brennan caught her arm as she moved past him. Thank you, he said quietly. Your father saved my life 23 years ago. You just saved it again. The Thorne family has a hell of a record. Get those men home safe, Master Sergeant. We will, because of you. The helicopter lifted off, and through the open door, Cass watched Wolfpack's positions shrink below them. 6 soldiers who would see tomorrow because she'd violated orders, abandoned her mission, and chosen the immediate over the strategic. The lieutenant colonel sat across from her, his expression unreadable behind his flight helmet. They didn't speak during the 20-minute flight to Forward Operating Base Grizzly. There was nothing to say yet. The conversation that mattered would happen on the ground. FOB Grizzly was a temporary installation built around an old Cold War radar station in the Montana wilderness. The base housed 200 personnel supporting counterterrorism operations along the northern border. Cass had staged from here 11 days ago when her Markov surveillance mission began. It felt like a lifetime had passed since then. The helicopter landed on the makeshift pad. Military police were waiting. Not a good sign. MPs only showed up when someone was in serious trouble. Lieutenant Thorne, you'll come with me, the lieutenant colonel said as they exited the bird. Your weapon will be secured as evidence. Evidence? Cass felt a spike of alarm. Sir, what exactly am I being charged with? That's above my pay grade. Colonel Merrick wants to see you immediately. Colonel Adelaide Merrick, commander of Joint Special Operations Task Force North. Cass had met her exactly once during the initial briefing for the Markov operation. Merrick had a reputation as a hard charger who'd come up through Army intelligence during the First Gulf War. Fair but uncompromising. The kind of officer who expected orders to be followed without deviation. They walked through the base in silence. Soldiers stared as they passed. Word had already spread. In military installations, gossip moved faster than official communications. The command building was a prefabricated structure that looked like it had been airlifted in whole. Inside, the temperature was barely warmer than outside. Budget constraints meant heat was rationed. Colonel Merrick's office was at the end of a narrow corridor. The lieutenant colonel knocked once, then opened the door. Lieutenant Thorne, ma'am. Send her in. Dismissed. Cass stepped inside. The office was sparse. A desk, 2 chairs, a map of the operational area covering one wall. Merrick sat behind the desk reviewing a tablet. She didn't look up immediately. Cass stood at attention, eyes forward waiting. 30 seconds passed. A power play showing who controlled the conversation. Finally, Merrick set down the tablet and looked at her. Sit down, Lieutenant. Cass sat. Her uniform was still damp from the sleet, crusted with mud and blood. She probably looked like she'd been dragged backward through the mountains, which wasn't far from the truth. Do you know why you're here? I violated a direct order, ma'am. I abandoned my observation post and engaged in combat operations without authorization. That's the generous interpretation. Merrick pulled up something on her tablet. Let me read you the formal charges being prepared. Article 92, failure to obey a lawful order. Article 86, absence without leave from your assigned position. Article 118, 32, counts of unauthorized use of lethal force. Do you understand the severity of these charges? Yes, ma'am. The Article 118 charges alone could result in a court-martial and dishonorable discharge. Your career would be over. Everything you've worked for gone. Cass met Merrick's eyes. I understand, ma'am. Duh. Yeah, because from where I'm sitting, you threw away 11 days of intelligence work that allowed a high-value target to escape with weapons that could kill hundreds of civilians, and did it all to play hero for a squad that had QRF inbound. With respect, ma'am, QRF was 90 minutes out. Wolfpack had maybe 15 minutes before being overrun. The math was simple. The math, Merrick repeated, her voice sharp. You want to talk about math, 6 soldiers versus potentially hundreds of civilians who could die when Markov sells those missiles to terrorists. Walk me through that math, Lieutenant. This was the moment Cass had been preparing for during the entire helicopter ride. She'd known this question was coming. She'd rehearsed her answer a dozen times in her head. But now, sitting across from a colonel who held her career in her hands, the rehearsed words felt hollow. I can't justify it strategically, ma'am. You're right. By the numbers, I made the wrong choice. Then why did you make it? Because 6 men were dying in front of me, and I had the skills to save them. Because my father died waiting for support that was 20 minutes away, but never came. Because I joined the army to protect people, and I couldn't protect anyone by sitting in a hide site watching through a scope. Merrick leaned back in her chair. Your father, Captain Mitchell Thorne. I served with him in Desert Storm. Did you know that? Cass felt like she'd been hit. No, ma'am, I didn't. He was my company commander, best officer I ever served under. He taught me that leadership meant making hard choices, choices that looked wrong on paper, but felt right in your gut. Merrick paused. The day he died, he was ordered to hold position while another unit conducted a flanking maneuver. He violated those orders to reinforce a pinned-down squad. Saved 7 lives, including mine. The room fell silent. Cass could hear the wind rattling the prefabricated walls, the distant sound of a helicopter taking off. I recommended him for a Medal of Honor, Merrick continued. It was downgraded to a Silver Star because he'd violated orders. The Army doesn't like giving its highest decoration to people who can't follow instructions, even when those instructions get people killed. Ma'am, I didn't know. Your father and I had an argument the night before he died. I told him he needed to follow the chain of command, trust the system. He told me the system was made of people, and people make mistakes, and sometimes you have to trust your judgment more than you trust the plan. Merrick's voice softened. He was right. I was wrong, and I've regretted that argument for 23 years. A knock on the door interrupted them. Ma'am, Master Sergeant Brennan is here. He's insisting on speaking with you. Merrick frowned. He should be at the hospital with his team. He refused medical transport until he could deliver his statement, ma'am. Send him in. Garrett Brennan entered the office. He looked worse than Cass felt. His uniform was soaked with blood, his face gray with pain and exhaustion. But he stood straight, every inch the professional soldier. Colonel Merrick, I need to provide testimony regarding Lieutenant Thorne's actions tonight. Master Sergeant, you should be in a hospital bed. I'll go after this, ma'am, but what I have to say can't wait. Merrick gestured to the empty chair. Sit down before you fall down. Brennan sat wincing as the movement pulled at his wounds. He pulled out a small notebook, the kind NCOs carried to document everything. Ma'am, at approximately 2100 hours, Wolfpack was ambushed by a force of approximately 45 hostile combatants. We took immediate casualties and were pinned down in an indefensible position. I called for QRF and was informed support was 90 minutes out. I'm aware of the timeline, Master Sergeant. Then you're aware that 90 minutes was a death sentence. We had 2 critical casualties, limited ammunition, and no fallback position. We were going to die. Brennan opened his notebook. At 2112 hours, Lieutenant Thorne made contact. She was 8 kilometers from our position. She closed that distance in under 20 minutes, established an overwatch position, and began engaging targets. He read from his notes with precise detail. First target, enemy mortar team at 182 meters. 3 shots, 3 kills, mortar threat neutralized. Second target, PKM machine gun nest at 920 meters. 3 shots, 3 kills. Third target, RPG team at 850 meters. In total, Lieutenant Thorne engaged and eliminated 32 hostile combatants over a period of approximately 90 minutes. Ranges varied from 760 meters to 182 meters. Conditions included 14 to 19-mile-per-hour winds, rain transitioning to sleet temperature, 31 degrees Fahrenheit, and degraded visibility. Merrick was watching Brennan intently now. 32 confirmed eliminations. Yes, ma'am, I personally observed or confirmed each one. Additionally, Lieutenant Thorne disabled 2 technical vehicles and 1 BTR-70 armored personnel carrier using precision rifle fire against critical components and personnel. That's impossible, Merrick said flatly. Nobody makes 32 kills in one engagement with a bolt-action rifle. I saw it happen, ma'am. So did 5 other soldiers who are alive because of it. Brennan turned a page in his notebook. At 21:40 hours, Lieutenant Thorne engaged and defeated an enemy counter-sniper in direct confrontation. Both snipers fired simultaneously at a range of approximately 940 meters. The enemy was killed. Lieutenant Thorne sustained minor injuries but continued operations. He closed the notebook. Colonel, I've served 19 years. I've worked with SEALs, Delta, SAS, and every other Tier 1 unit you can name. I have never, and I mean never, witnessed shooting of this caliber. What Lieutenant Thorne did tonight wasn't just saving our lives. It was a combat action that will be studied in sniper schools for decades. Merrick picked up her tablet, scrolling through something. According to military records, the highest confirmed kills in a single engagement by an American sniper was Sergeant Alvin York in World War I. He eliminated 28 German soldiers at the Battle of Argonne Forest and received the Medal of Honor. Lieutenant Thorne exceeded that, ma'am, and she did it at 3 to 4 times the range York was shooting. And she did it, Merrick said quietly, while violating direct orders and abandoning a mission that could prevent a major terrorist attack. The room fell silent again. The weight of those words hung in the air like smoke. Brennan spoke carefully. Ma'am, I'm not qualified to judge strategic priorities. That's for officers to decide. But I can tell you that 6 American soldiers are alive tonight because Lieutenant Thorne chose to violate orders. 6 men who will go home to families, to children, to futures they wouldn't have had. That has to count for something. It does, Master Sergeant. But in the military, we can't have soldiers making their own decisions about when to follow orders and when to ignore them. That way lies chaos. With respect, ma'am, that's exactly what officers do every day. You make decisions based on the situation on the ground, not on some plan written by people who aren't there. You're asking Lieutenant Thorne to be punished for doing what every good officer is trained to do: adapt and overcome. Merrick stood up. Master Sergeant Brennan, you're dismissed. Get to the hospital before you pass out in my office. Ma'am, that wasn't a suggestion. Brennan stood swaying slightly. He looked at Cass. Lieutenant, it's been an honor. Your father would be proud. After he left, Merrick walked to the map on the wall. She stared at it for a long moment, her back to Cass. Do you know what the hardest part of command is, Lieutenant? No, ma'am. It's knowing that every decision you make has consequences you can't fully predict. You think you're choosing between mission and lives, but you're also choosing between the precedent you set and the message you send. She turned around. If I exonerate you, every lieutenant in the Army will think they can violate orders whenever they disagree with them. If I punish you, I'm telling soldiers that following orders matters more than saving lives. There's no good answer. Ma'am, I'm not asking to be exonerated. I made a choice. I'll accept the consequences. Noble. Stupid, but noble. Merrick returned to her desk. You're grounded pending investigation. Your weapon is secured. You're restricted to base. Is that clear? Yes, ma'am. Dismissed. Cass stood saluted and turned to leave. Lieutenant? She stopped. Off the record, I would have done the same thing. Your father taught me that some things matter more than careers. I'm sorry it took me 23 years to remember that lesson. Cass didn't trust herself to speak. She nodded and left the office. The barracks were nearly empty when she arrived. Most personnel were on duty or deployed. She had a small room to herself, 8 by 10 feet, with a cot, a locker, and a desk. She stripped off her wet uniform and stood in the shower until the hot water ran out. The cut on her cheek had stopped bleeding, but would definitely scar, a reminder of how close she'd come to dying tonight. When she finally lay down on the cot, exhaustion hit her like a physical weight. She'd been awake for 36 hours, spent 6 hours motionless in a sniper hide, descended a mountain in darkness, and engaged in the most intense combat action of her life. Sleep should have been immediate, Instead, she stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying every shot, every decision. The look on Brennan's face when he'd connected her to her father. The weight of Merrick's words about consequences and precedent. Her phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Lieutenant Thorne, this is Rowan Fletcher from Wolfpack. Got your number from the duty roster. Wanted you to know Harmon and Madigan are both going to be fine. Doctors say another 20 minutes and Harmon would have lost the leg. You saved more than our lives tonight. You saved our futures. Thank you doesn't seem like enough, but thank you. More messages followed, from Declan Shaw, from Tobias Grant, from Quinn Madigan, typing slowly with what she imagined were concussion-shaky hands, all saying variations of the same thing. You saved us. We owe you. Thank you. Cass set the phone down and closed her eyes. 32 confirmed eliminations. One career probably ended, 6 lives saved. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Something he'd told her when she was 12 after she'd missed a shot on an elk and felt like a failure. Cassie, you measure success by whether you did the right thing, not by whether you hit the target. Sometimes the right thing is missing. Sometimes the right thing is taking the shot when everyone tells you not to. You'll know the difference when it matters. She'd known the difference tonight. She'd taken the shot that mattered. The consequences would come tomorrow. Tonight she let herself believe it had been worth it. Cass fell asleep with her father's words in her head and 6 lives on her conscience. 6 lives that wouldn't have existed if she'd followed orders. It was enough. Outside, the sleet had turned to snow. By morning, it would cover the mountains in white, erasing the evidence of battle like the world was starting fresh. But the decisions made tonight would echo for much longer than one snowfall. In a hospital 30 miles south, Garrett Brennan was arguing with doctors who wanted to sedate him. He had calls to make statements, to file a lieutenant to defend. They could drug him after he'd done what needed to be done. At FOB Grizzly, Colonel Merrick was on a secure line with the Pentagon, explaining why one of her officers had violated orders and exceeded the single engagement kill record of every American sniper since World War I. And somewhere in the mountains, Alexei Markov was loading 6 Stinger missiles onto a helicopter, disappearing into the darkness with weapons that could down airliners and kill hundreds. All of this because a 28-year-old lieutenant had chosen to save 6 lives she could see over hundreds she couldn't. The ripples were just beginning. Cass woke to someone pounding on her door. The sky outside her window was still dark. She checked her watch. 0430. She'd been asleep for less than 3 hours. Lieutenant Thorne, you're wanted in the command center. Now. She dressed quickly, pulling on a clean uniform. Her body protested every movement. Muscles she'd kept locked in shooting positions for hours had stiffened overnight. The cut on her cheek throbbed with each heartbeat. The command center was a converted Cold War bunker that had been upgraded with modern communications equipment. Inside it was organized chaos. A dozen personnel worked at computer stations monitoring feeds from drones, satellites, and ground units across the operational area. Colonel Merrick stood at the central display, arms crossed, staring at a satellite feed. She didn't look like she'd slept either. Lieutenant, good you're here. Merrick pointed at the display. We have a problem. Actually, we have several problems, and you're at the center of all of them. The screen showed thermal imagery of a compound. Cass recognized it immediately. Markov's base. The place she'd been watching for 11 days. This feed is from 20 minutes ago. As you can see, the compound is abandoned. Markov is gone. The missiles are already gone. 11 days of intelligence work wasted. Cass forced herself to keep her face neutral. She'd known this was coming, but hearing it confirmed still felt like a punch to the gut. However, DJ, Merrick continued, pulling up a different feed. We have new intelligence. NSA intercepted communications suggesting Markov is moving the missiles to a secondary location. He's meeting with buyers in 72 hours at a location we haven't identified yet. 72 hours isn't much time, ma'am. No, it's not, which brings me to problem 2. Merrick turned to face her directly. Your actions last night have created a political firestorm. The story leaked. By 0600, every major news outlet will be running some version of female sniper saves squad violates orders sets record. The Pentagon is scrambling to control the narrative. Cass felt her stomach drop. Ma'am, I didn't talk to any reporters. I know, but Wolfpack did. Apparently, Master Sergeant Brennan has been making calls all night from his hospital bed. He contacted every military affairs reporter he knows, gave them the full story complete with his eyewitness testimony. By the time my people realized what was happening, it was too late to stop it. I'll talk to him. Tell him to retract. Too late for that, too. The story is out, and here's where it gets interesting. Merrick pulled up a news headline on the display. Public reaction is overwhelmingly positive. You're being called a hero. Social media is exploding with support. Veterans groups are demanding you be decorated, not court-martialed. I don't understand. Why is that a problem? Because the Pentagon was preparing to quietly reprimand you and move on. Now they can't. The public is watching. If they punish you, they look like they're punishing someone for saving American lives. If they don't punish you, they're setting a precedent that orders are optional. Merrick almost smiled. You've put the Army in an impossible position, Lieutenant. Congratulations. A Major Cass didn't recognize entered the bunker carrying a tablet. Colonel, the Chief of Staff's office is on the line. They want an update on the Thorn situation. Tell them I'll call back in 10 minutes. Merrick waited until the Major left, then lowered her voice. Lieutenant, I'm going to be direct with you. There are people in the Pentagon who want to make an example of you. There are other people who want to make you a poster child for the new Army. You're caught in the middle of a political fight that has nothing to do with what actually happened on that mountain. What do you recommend, ma'am? I recommend you prepare for a very long week. There will be an investigation. You'll be interviewed by everyone from JAG to Stars and Stripes. Every decision you made will be scrutinized. Merrick paused. But here's what I know. You made 32 confirmed kills in one engagement. That's not just a record. That's a case study in precision marksmanship that will be taught at sniper schools for the next 50 years. The Army can't court-martial that kind of performance without looking incompetent. So what happens now? Now we wait for the powers that be to make a decision. In the meantime, you're still restricted to base. Merrick's expression softened slightly. Off the record, I think you did the right thing. But doing the right thing doesn't always protect you from the consequences. Cass returned to her barracks as the sun was rising. She checked her phone and immediately regretted it. 47 missed calls. Over 100 text messages. Her social media accounts, which she barely used, had thousands of notifications. Most were supportive. Veterans thanking her for her service. Active duty soldiers calling her a hero. But there were also angry messages. People calling her a glory hound. Armchair strategists explaining why she'd made the wrong tactical decision. A few threats from people who thought women shouldn't be in combat roles at all. She turned off her phone and tried to sleep. It didn't work. Her mind kept replaying the previous night. Every shot, every decision point. The look on Brennan's face when he'd connected her to her father. At 0800, there was another knock on her door. This time it was a lieutenant she vaguely recognized from the intelligence section. Ma'am, Colonel Merrick wants you in Conference Room B. There's someone here to see you. Conference Room B was typically used for classified briefings. When Cass entered, she found 3 people waiting. Colonel Merrick, a woman in civilian clothes she didn't recognize, and Master Sergeant Garrett Brennan. Brennan looked like hell. His face was gray, his movements careful. He was supposed to be in a hospital bed, but here he was sitting in a metal folding chair, like he hadn't been shot and shrapnel wounded less than 12 hours ago. Master Sergeant, what are you doing here? You should be under medical care. I signed myself out AMA, Brennan said, against medical advice. I needed to be here. The woman in civilian clothes stood up. She was in her late 50s with silver hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent decades in positions of authority. Lieutenant Thorne, I'm Sarah Brennan, Garrett's wife. She extended her hand. I wanted to meet the woman who saved my husband's life. Cass shook her hand, feeling suddenly awkward. Mrs. Brennan, I just did my job. No, you didn't. Your job was to watch a terrorist. You chose to save 6 soldiers instead, knowing it would cost you everything. Sarah's eyes were bright with emotion. My husband called me at 3 in the morning from a hospital bed. He told me what you did. He told me about your father. He told me that the Thorne family has saved his life twice now, 23 years apart. Ma'am, let me finish. Sarah's voice was firm but kind. We have 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. They all have their father today because of you. My youngest is getting married next month. Garrett will walk her down the aisle because you chose to violate orders. I don't care about military protocol or mission priorities. I care that my husband is alive. Thank you doesn't cover it, but thank you. Cass felt something tight in her chest. She thought about the tactical aspects of her decision, the strategic implications, the career consequences. She hadn't thought about weddings and families and all the small moments that 6 soldiers would experience because they hadn't died on a mountain. There's something else, Brennan said, pulling out an envelope. I did some research last night, made some calls. I found something I think you should see. He handed her the envelope. Inside was a faded photograph. The image showed a group of soldiers in desert camouflage somewhere in Iraq or Kuwait during Desert Storm. She recognized her father immediately. Captain Mitchell Thorne stood in the center, one hand on the shoulder of a younger soldier beside him. The younger soldier was Garrett Brennan 23 years ago, before the gray hair and the weathered face, before 19 years of service and countless deployments. That was taken 2 days before the ground war ended, Brennan said quietly. Your father had just led us through the worst firefight of my life. We'd gotten separated from our unit, ambushed by Republican Guard forces. He could have left us, rejoined the main force. Instead, he stayed, fought with us, got us out. Brennan pointed to another soldier in the photo. That's Corporal James Hendricks. He was killed the next day when a supply convoy hit an IED. That's Specialist Maria Gonzalez. She made it home, had 2 kids, died of cancer in 2008. That's Private First Class David Morrison. He's a high school teacher now in Ohio, has 4 grandchildren. He looked at Cass. Your father saved 7 lives that day, including mine. Every one of us went on to have families, careers, futures we wouldn't have had. The ripples from one decision, from one person choosing to do the right thing instead of following orders, they spread out in ways you can't predict. Your father's choice 23 years ago, it led to my children existing. It led to grandchildren who are alive because Captain Thorne decided some things mattered more than following the plan. Cass stared at the photograph. Her father looked so young, younger than she was now, making decisions that would echo for decades. Last night, Brennan continued, you made the same choice your father made, and just like him, you're facing consequences for it. But I want you to understand something. Those 6 men you saved, they'll have children, grandchildren. Every life they touch from this moment forward exists because you pulled that trigger 32 times. The math isn't 6 lives versus hundreds. It's 6 lives that branch into thousands, into futures you'll never see, but that you made possible. Colonel Merrick spoke for the first time since Cass had entered the room. Master Sergeant Brennan contacted me this morning with a proposal. I've forwarded it up the chain. I don't know if it will be approved, but I think you should hear it. Brennan pulled out a folder. Lieutenant, the Army is establishing a new program, Advanced Designated Marksman School. The goal is to train the next generation of precision shooters using updated doctrine and improved methodology. They need someone to develop the curriculum. Someone who understands not just the technical aspects of long-range shooting, but the decision-making process that goes into it. I'm 28 years old, Master Sergeant. There are snipers with twice my experience. Experience isn't the same as expertise. You just set a record that will stand for decades. You made shots under conditions that most snipers would consider impossible. More importantly, you demonstrated something that can't be taught from a manual. Judgment under pressure. The ability to make hard choices when there's no good answer. Brennan slid the folder across the table. Colonel Merrick is recommending you for the position. If approved, you'd be promoted to captain and given command of an 8-person training cadre. Your job would be to develop the program and train the first class of students. Cass opened the folder. Inside was a formal proposal dense with military terminology and bureaucratic language. But the core message was clear. They wanted her to build something new, to take what she'd learned and pass it on. There's a condition, Merrick said. Markov is still out there with those missiles. Intelligence suggests he's meeting with buyers in 72 hours. If you take this position, your first operational test would be leading a team to recover those missiles and neutralize Markov. You'd have 5 months to train your team, then you'd deploy. Succeed and the program becomes permanent. You'd be setting the standard for Army sniper doctrine for the next generation. And if I fail, then the program gets canceled and everyone involved takes the blame. High risk, high reward. Merrick met her eyes. I won't lie to you, Lieutenant. This is partially a political solution. The Pentagon needs a way to resolve the controversy around your actions without either punishing a hero or appearing to condone insubordination. This program gives them a third option. Use your skills, promote you, make you the face of a new initiative. Everyone wins. Except if I fail the mission? Except then, yes. Cass looked at the photograph of her father again. He'd made hard choices, faced consequences, but he'd never stopped doing what he believed was right, even when the system punished him for it. I have a question, ma'am. The team I'd be training and leading. Would I have input on who gets selected? Full input. It's your program, your team, your responsibility. Then I want Master Sergeant Brennan as my senior enlisted advisor, assuming he's medically cleared and willing. Brennan straightened despite his obvious pain. Ma'am, I'd be honored, but I'm not a qualified sniper. You're a master sergeant with 19 years of experience who knows how to lead soldiers in combat. That's what I need. The shooting skills we can teach. Leadership and judgment are harder to find. Merrick made a note on her tablet. I'll add that to the proposal. Anyone else? I want to review the personnel files of every qualified sniper and designated marksman in the Army. I'll need time to make selections. You shall have it, but understand, Lieutenant, this isn't a sure thing. The proposal still needs approval from multiple levels, and there are people who'd rather see you court-martialed than promoted. I understand, ma'am. Good, because starting right now, you're going to be under more scrutiny than you've ever experienced. Every decision will be questioned, every action analyzed. Welcome to leadership, Lieutenant. It's not as fun as pulling triggers. The next week was exactly as Merrick had predicted. Investigators arrived, JAG officers conducted interviews. Cass spent hours in conference rooms explaining her decision-making process, defending her actions, providing technical details about every shot she'd taken. The media attention intensified. News crews appeared outside FOB Grizzly. Veterans groups issued statements. The story of the female sniper who'd broken records and violated orders became a national conversation about military protocol, gender and combat roles, and the nature of following orders. Through it all, Cass maintained the same position. She'd made the choice she could live with. She understood there would be consequences. She'd accept whatever decision the Army made. On the 8th day after the engagement, Colonel Merrick called her to the command center. When Cass arrived, she found Merrick holding a phone, her expression carefully neutral. Lieutenant, I have the Chief of Staff's office on the line. They have a decision regarding your case. Merrick put the call on speaker. A male voice, crisp and authoritative, filled the room. Lieutenant Thorne, this is General Marcus Webb, Army Chief of Staff. I've reviewed the investigation into your actions, the testimony from Master Sergeant Brennan and his team, and the recommendations from your chain of command. I've also read the after-action report from your engagement. 32 confirmed eliminations at extended range under adverse conditions. Unprecedented performance. Cass stood at attention even though he couldn't see her. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. Lieutenant, what you did was tactically brilliant and strategically questionable. You saved 6 lives and potentially allowed weapons to reach terrorists who could kill hundreds. The Army has spent the last week trying to figure out how to handle this contradiction. Yes, sir. Here's what we've decided. You will receive a formal letter of reprimand in your personnel file for violating direct orders. That reprimand will remain classified. To the public and media, we will say that your actions were within the scope of operational discretion granted to field commanders facing dynamic situations. Cass felt her heart sink. A letter of reprimand would follow her for the rest of her career. Every promotion board would see it. Every command selection would be influenced by it. However, General Webb continued, you will also receive the Silver Star for gallantry in action. Your citation will specifically mention your precision marksmanship and the lives saved through your intervention. Additionally, your single engagement record of 32 confirmed eliminations will be officially recognized in Army records. Sir, I'm not finished, Lieutenant. The Advanced Designated Marksman School program has been approved. You will be promoted to captain effective immediately and given command of the program. You will have 6 months to develop curriculum, select and train your initial team, and conduct a proof-of-concept operation. The Secretary of the Army himself will be watching this program. Do not disappoint him. No, sir, I won't, sir. One more thing, Captain Thorne. Your father, Captain Mitchell Thorne, received a Silver Star for actions in Desert Storm. The Army initially recommended him for a Medal of Honor, but it was downgraded due to his violation of orders during the action for which he was being recognized. I've reviewed that case. I'm recommending to the Secretary of the Army that your father's Silver Star be upgraded to a Distinguished Service Cross. Posthumously, of course, but his record will reflect the true nature of his actions. Cass felt tears burning behind her eyes. She forced them back through sheer will. Sir, that would mean everything to my family. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank Master Sergeant Brennan. He's been making calls all week building a case. He's a persistent man. There was a brief pause. Captain Thorne, the Army needs leaders who can make hard decisions under pressure, who understand that sometimes the right choice isn't the one in the manual. Your father was that kind of leader. I expect you to follow in his footsteps. Congratulations and good luck. The line went dead. Cass stood in the command center trying to process what had just happened. Promoted, decorated, given command of a new program, and her father 23 years after his death finally getting the recognition he deserved. Merrick was smiling, actually smiling something Cass had never seen before. Congratulations, Captain. You just became the youngest person to command a training program in JSOC history. No pressure. Ma'am, I don't know if I'm ready for this. Nobody's ever ready. You learn by doing. Merrick handed her a folder. These are the personnel files you requested. Every qualified sniper and designated marksman in the Army. You have 72 hours to make your selections. Your team will report to Fort Benning in 2 weeks to begin training. Cass took the folder. It was thick, heavy with the weight of hundreds of careers and thousands of hours of training. Somewhere in these files were the 8 people who would become her team, who would go with her to find Markov and recover those missiles. Ma'am, what if I choose wrong? What if my team fails? Then you'll learn from it and do better next time. That's what leadership is, Captain. Making decisions with incomplete information and living with the consequences. Merrick paused. Your father understood that. Now you do too. 4 months later, Fort Benning, Georgia. Captain Cassandra Thorne stood at the edge of the advanced marksmanship range, watching her team run through shooting drills. 8 soldiers, 4 men and 4 women selected from hundreds of applicants. Each one a qualified expert marksman. Each one hungry to learn to improve to become something more than they already were. Master Sergeant Brennan walked up beside her, moving without the limp that had plagued him for the first 2 months after his injuries. He'd recovered, well thrown himself into the role of senior enlisted advisor with the same intensity he brought to everything. They're looking good, ma'am. Corporal Martinez just made a confirmed hit at 1,400 meters. Sergeant Foster went 3 for 3 at 1,212 mile-per-hour winds. They're ready, Cass said, or as ready as they're going to be in 5 months. 48 hours later, Cass lay prone on a ridge overlooking Markov's new compound. The position was 1,340 meters from the target. Beside her, Corporal Elena Martinez adjusted her scope. Behind them, 6 other members of her team were positioned in a staggered line, each with overlapping fields of fire. Master Sergeant Brennan's voice came through her earpiece. All positions report. One by one, and her team checked in. Sergeant Callum Foster on the western approach. Staff Sergeant Jade Winters covering the southern route. They'd trained together for 5 months. Now they'd find out if it was enough. Through her scope, Cass saw movement in the compound. Markov emerged from the main building, gesturing to 4 men in tactical gear. Behind them, wooden crates, the right size for Stinger missile tubes. I have eyes on the package, Cass whispered. 6 hostiles visible, Markov confirmed. Copy, Brennan said from the command vehicle 2 kilometers back. You're authorized to engage on your mark. Cass's finger moved to her trigger. This was different from that night 4 months ago. Then she'd been alone making impossible shots in the darkness. Now she had a team. People who trusted her. People she'd trained. All shooters priority targets on my count. 3-2, 1 execute. 8 rifles spoke as one. The precision was beautiful, clinical. In 3 seconds, 6 guards dropped. Markov dove behind a vehicle reaching for a radio. Martinez, disable that vehicle. Cass ordered. Martinez's shot punched through the engine block. The vehicle died with a grinding sound. Foster blocked the southern gate. Foster put 2 rounds into the gate's hydraulic system. It groaned and jammed halfway closed. Markov was trapped. He knew it. Through her scope, Cass watched him make the calculation. Fight or surrender? He dropped his radio and raised his hands. Target is surrendering, Cass reported. Brennan, send in the ground element. 20 minutes later, FBI vehicles rolled into the compound. Agents secured Markov and the missiles. Mission complete. No friendly casualties. No collateral damage. Perfect execution. As they extracted from their positions, Martinez fell in beside Cass. Ma'am, that was textbook. Everything you taught us, it worked. It worked because you trusted your training, because you trusted each other. Cass looked at her team, 8 faces that had become familiar over 5 months of dawn to dusk drilling. Your father would be proud of what we built here. Brennan was waiting at the extraction point. When he saw Cass, he smiled. The FBI just confirmed. All 6 missiles recovered. Markov is in custody. And before you ask, yes, they found evidence linking him to the domestic extremist cells. This closes down their entire network. So we actually prevented the attack. You prevented it twice. Once by warning us it was coming, once by taking down the source. Brennan paused. The program is approved. Permanent funding. They want you to train 3 more classes over the next 2 years. You just proved that your methods work. Cass looked back at the compound. At the place where she'd closed the loop her decision had opened. The mission she'd abandoned to save 6 lives completed with a team she'd built from scratch. My father's ceremony is next week, she said quietly. Will you be there? Wouldn't miss it. He earned that Distinguished Service Cross, just like you earned your Silver Star. I didn't do it for medals. I know, that's why you got them. 1 week later, Arlington National Cemetery. Cass stood in her dress uniform as a color guard presented her mother with the Distinguished Service Cross, upgrading her father's Silver Star 23 years after his death. Her mother's hands shook as she accepted the medal, tears running down her face. Behind eyes stood the 8 members of her team. Behind them all 6 members of Wolfpack, including Quinn Madigan and Elijah Harmon, both fully recovered. When the ceremony ended, her mother pulled Cass aside. Your father would be so proud, not just of the medal, of you, of what you've become. I'm just trying to live up to his example. No, sweetheart, you're building your own legacy now. He showed you the foundation. You're building something new on it. That evening at a restaurant near the cemetery, both teams gathered. Wolfpack and the Advanced Designated Marksman School cadre, 16 soldiers whose lives had been shaped by one decision made on a mountain 4 months ago. Brennan raised his glass. To Captain Thorne, who taught us that sometimes the hardest missions are the ones that save lives instead of taking them. To Captain Thorne, the group echoed. Cass looked around the table, at faces that were alive because she'd violated orders, at students who would carry forward the skills and judgment she'd taught them, at a legacy that extended beyond any single mission or medal. Her father had saved 7 lives by choosing principle over protocol. She'd saved 6, then trained 8 more to make the same kinds of choices. The math kept multiplying. The ripples kept spreading. And somewhere in training facilities across the country, new snipers would learn not just how to shoot, but when to shoot, why to shoot, and most importantly, when the choice to pull the trigger mattered more than any order ever could. That was the real mission. That was the legacy worth building. Captain Cassandra Thorne smiled and raised her glass. Some things were worth the cost. This was one of them.